She was mocked by her millionaire husband and his friends for coming from a poor family background. Then she left with her twin daughters, launched her own empire, and they regretted. Welcome, dreamers of love and seekers of twilight magic. If your heart beats for timeless romance, soul-stirring stories, and the glow of enchanting nights, you've just found your sanctuary. Subscribe now, tap the bell, and join our growing family, because every twilight holds a story, and together we'll live them all. The penthouse ballroom shimmered with floor-to-ceiling crystal chandeliers casting soft, golden reflections over tuxedos, champagne flutes, and laughter that knew no shame. They had gathered to toast another acquisition. Another headline for Jordan Moreno, Spain's favorite tech lion. From obscurity to billionaire in a decade, every investor wanted to shake his hand. Nevia Moreno, his wife of 7 years, stood beside him in a green silk gown that clung to her like a second skin, her posture poised, smile fixed, eyes unreadable. But inside her chest, something was cracking open. She held her champagne loosely, swirling it with disinterest. She didn't sip. Not tonight. Not when she could hear the laughter rising from the table beside her. Her husband's voice was the loudest. Nevia. Jordan chuckled, placing his hand casually on the back of her chair. She's still figuring herself out. She applied to a flower shop last week and got rejected. Laughter. Real, careless, thundering laughter. One of the executives howled. No way. A flower shop? Jordan leaned in conspiratorially, winking at them. Can't make this up. Guess I married her for her smile. And again, they laughed. But no one laughed harder than Jordan. Nevia kept her face still. Not a blink, not a twitch, just a small tilt of her head, like she'd heard a waiter offer 2 kinds of wine and was considering which would stain her tongue less. Jordan didn't notice. Of course he didn't. The man who used to trace her collarbone with reverence now paraded her scars for applause. The same man who'd sworn to protect her from the cruelty of the world now fed her to it. She turned slightly, letting the lights bounce off her neckline, her earrings swaying like bells in a storm. She caught the eye of Xavier, Jordan's best friend, seated just across the table. His smile faltered. He looked uncomfortable. But he didn't say a word. Coward, she thought. Not for the first time. She excused herself quietly and walked out to the balcony, closing the glass doors behind her. The chill of Madrid's dusk nipped at her skin. Below, the city sparkled like it was alive, breathing, whispering, watching, and she whispered back, "Let them laugh." Inside, Jordan stood, tapping a spoon to his glass. The chatter dimmed. All eyes turned toward him. To success, he bellowed. To another merger that only makes sense because we eat small companies like breakfast. More laughter. He raised his glass and smirked. And to my wife, Nevia, who's still trying to figure out which side of a resume goes up. The room roared. Xavier lowered his head. A woman at the back raised an eyebrow. But most of them? They clapped. Nevia turned from the balcony railing and watched through the glass, her figure hidden by shadows. Jordan beamed, basking in praise that didn't belong to him. Not really. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the very company they were celebrating tonight was hers, acquired silently, built secretly, orchestrated behind layers of legal disguise and financial finesse. They thought they were laughing at the poor girl who married up, but they were dancing inside a house she had built brick by brick under their noses. Let them laugh, she whispered again. Because tomorrow, they'll kneel. She turned and walked inside. Her heels clicked across the marble as if each step was marking a countdown. When she returned to her seat, Jordan threw his arm around her casually. "You're a good sport," he said. "Even the girls at my office wouldn't take a joke like that." "Maybe they know the punchline," she replied softly. He laughed. Didn't catch it. Didn't care to. Back at the table, Nevia allowed her eyes to travel across the room again. It was a sea of tailored suits and wine-stained lips, men with egos inflated by numbers and women smiling politely beside them. But no one in that room knew what she was about to do. No one knew that the merger deal they were celebrating wasn't just another trophy for Jordan's shelf. It was a full acquisition, an absorption, and she had orchestrated every step. For years, Nevia had studied in silence. While Jordan slept, she read books on financial engineering. While he went to gala events with Sophia, yes, she'd known, she was on encrypted calls with lawyers in Luxembourg. While he mocked her job hunts, she was building alliances with venture capitalists who owed her favors they couldn't speak aloud. And now, with the legal smoke cleared, the ink dried, and the final signatures filed, she owned him. Not just him, but everything he stood on. His company, his legacy, his power. And tomorrow morning, when she walked into that boardroom as the executive chair of Alcara Group, the world would know what power looked like in silence. The real kind. The kind that doesn't boast, doesn't beg, doesn't wear a tuxedo and toast to stolen credit. She reached for her glass again, this time sipping. The champagne was sharp, sweet at first, then bitter. Just like truth. Jordan leaned over. "Don't take it personally, babe. You know how we talk when we're drunk." "I know," she said. "That's when the truth comes out." He snorted, then turned back to his colleagues. She smiled. He didn't know this was his last night at the top. The suite smelled of bergamot and smoked cedar, a signature fragrance. Jordan had commissioned personally, expensive, masculine, forgettable. Nevaeh stepped inside the space first, her heels echoing across marble before she stopped to peel them off. Her feet ached, but she didn't complain. She never did. Not even when her ankles swelled after carrying twins. Not even when Jordan mocked the thickness of her thighs 2 months postpartum. Now, she placed the shoes neatly by the wall and crossed to the open balcony doors. The Madrid night spilled in, cool, quiet, alert, a contrast to the ballroom downstairs where noise reigned, where men howled like kings. She didn't close the doors. She wanted the wind, the watchful silence. Behind her, the door clicked again. Jordan walked in, tie loose, jacket draped over one arm, the scent of whiskey already clinging to his breath. "That went well," he said, tossing his blazer onto the nearest chair. "Xavier nearly pissed himself when I made that flower shop joke." Nevaeh said nothing. She was looking out toward the distant skyline, where the golden tip of Alcara's headquarters glinted like a promise. "You're not going to cry about it, are you?" he asked lazily, uncorking a bottle of whiskey from the minibar. She turned slowly. "No. Good," he muttered, pouring 2 fingers worth into a crystal tumbler. "Because it's not like I lied. You've been a bit lost lately, floating." Her hands rested lightly on her hips. She wore that emerald silk gown with grace, no bra underneath, just curves drawn by motherhood and defiance. "I don't think you know what I've been," she said. Jordan sipped, then approached her with the same air he always carried after a party, convinced that success made him desirable, that deals inked and egos fed were aphrodisiacs. He placed the glass down, then ran his hand along her bare arm. "I know what you are," he said. "Mine." She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned in, let her fingers trace his shirt buttons, slow, teasing. "Yours," she repeated. "Exactly," he whispered, kissing the curve of her shoulder. Her skin didn't respond. Not really, but her mind was already 2 steps ahead. Let him touch. Let him think he still owns the map to her body. Let him indulge in the illusion. Tonight would be the last night he'd have her like this. Jordan's mouth was on her neck now, hands clumsy in their eagerness. He wasn't rough, but he wasn't tender either. He never was. Everything about him was designed to impress, not connect. His rhythm was scripted, his words recycled, his breath a routine. They undressed in quiet, him hurriedly, her slowly. He took her on the bed as if sealing a deal. It wasn't passionate, it wasn't cruel, it was just vacant. No questions, no foreplay, just possession. She let it happen, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. Her thoughts drifted to the briefcase in the closet. The folder inside, the documents already signed. He finished quickly, with a groan muffled into her shoulder. Then he rolled off her like a weight shedding itself and reached for his phone. She didn't move. His screen glowed in the dark, fingers swiping. Emails? Messages? Another assistant? Nevaeh didn't care. She felt the empty space beside her expand. It wasn't just in the sheets. It was in the history of their marriage, 7 years of being touched but never held. She sat up slowly, pulling the sheet around her like armor. "I'm heading to sleep," she said softly. Jordan grunted. He didn't say goodnight. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't notice the faint edge of steel in her voice. She slipped into the bathroom, closed the door quietly, and looked at herself in the mirror. The gown lay in a heap on the floor now, and in its place stood a woman with tired eyes, a perfect posture, and resolve so sharp it shimmered beneath her skin. She didn't hate her body. Not anymore. Her hips had carried life. Her breasts had nursed survival. Her thighs bore the strength of running from nothing to everything. And her scars? They were not from knives or accidents, but from laughter, from insults wrapped in silk, from being told she wasn't enough by a man who couldn't see beyond his own shadow. Nevaeh brushed her fingers down her ribcage, exhaled, and whispered to the woman staring back, "Tomorrow, he'll see everything he threw away." She opened the cabinet drawer and retrieved a folded slip of paper. A single line from Christina, printed neatly. All contracts confirmed. Ownership transfers at sunrise. She folded it again, placed it beneath her pillow. Then she slipped into a black silk nightgown, no lace, no embellishment, just pure elegance, the kind that didn't beg to be noticed, but couldn't be ignored. Back in bed, she lay beside the man who once claimed to love her. His snores were already softening into rhythm. She turned her back to him, not in protest, but in finality. He would never see her body like this again. Not when it shimmered with fire. Not when it belonged only to itself. The clock on the nightstand ticked softly beside the bed, marking time not with urgency, but with a sense of inevitability. Nevaeh's eyes remained open, her body still. Jordan slept beside her, one leg tossed carelessly over the sheets, his chest rising, and falling with the ease of a man who never questioned the comfort he'd been handed. She watched him for a long moment, not with longing, not even with resentment, just clarity. There was a time when his presence had stirred her, when he whispered promises into her collarbone and she believed him, when his hands felt like home and his ambition looked like protection. But that time had long passed. The man before her now was not her shelter. He was the ceiling. And ceilings. She was born to break through. She rose carefully, sliding from the bed without disturbing the mattress. Her feet touched the cold floor, and she welcomed the bite. It reminded her she was still in control of her steps. In the closet, she reached for the garment bag she had hidden weeks ago, tucked, behind Jordan's designer suits and coats, beneath a row of unused briefcases. She unzipped it slowly. Inside was a cream blouse and tailored slacks. Simple, sharp, intentional. The uniform of the woman she was becoming, the one who no longer needed to be draped in silk to be seen. She dressed quietly, methodically, every button a vow. She pinned her hair back, twisted into a smooth knot. No curls, no distractions, just purpose. Back in the bedroom, she paused at the edge of the bed, eyes on the man still sleeping. She almost whispered something. A goodbye, maybe, but she stopped herself. He didn't deserve last words. He didn't even know she'd already left him, emotionally, spiritually, strategically. And tomorrow, when she stood before him not as his wife, but as the woman who held the future of his company in her hands, that would be her goodbye. She slipped her phone into her bag. The screen lit up briefly. "Christina, boardroom's prepped, legal confirmed. The girls are safe with Sophia. Let's do this." Nevaeh typed only one word in reply. "Onward." She walked to the front of the suite and paused by the mirror. The same mirror that had reflected her doubt in the early years. The one that had seen her stomach grow with life. The one that had watched her cry after each job rejection. The one that bore witness when Jordan rolled his eyes at her ideas, and she swallowed the hurt. Tonight, it reflected none of that. Tonight, it reflected a woman reborn in silence. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small gold pendant, the one her mother had given her when she turned 18, a symbol of grit, not glamour. She fastened it around her neck, its weight grounding her. With one last glance toward the bedroom door, she walked out of the suite, leaving it unlocked. There was nothing left in that room that belonged to her. The hotel lobby was hushed at that hour, cleaners polishing the marble, a concierge yawning discreetly behind the desk. A few guests meandered in from late-night outings, none of them noticing the woman, who passed through in flats instead of heels, with eyes that didn't flicker. Outside, Madrid's early morning air met her with cool fingers. The sky above was dark blue, just starting to surrender to dawn. A car waited, not one of Jordan's black luxury sedans, but a modest electric model driven by a woman in a smart gray blazer. Christina. She stepped out and opened the door herself. Nevaeh slid in without a word. The door shut, and for the first time in years, Nevaeh inhaled fully, not as a wife, not as a trophy, but as a woman on the edge of her power. The city drifted past the windows, still sleepy. Cafes hadn't opened. Lights blinked on floor by floor in apartment towers. Somewhere above it all, Alcara Group's headquarters rose like a lighthouse over glass and stone. "Security knows you're coming," Christina said, eyes forward. "We'll meet you in the private boardroom. All internal clearances have been updated." Nevaeh nodded. "And Jordan?" Christina smirked faintly. "Still in bed. Press has no clue yet. He thinks he's celebrating a merger." Nevaeh's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something firmer. "It's not a merger," she said. "It's a takeover." Christina grinned. "Exactly." They drove in silence after that, letting the moment breathe. Nevaeh watched as the streetlights began to dim, the city preparing for morning traffic. But this day wouldn't be like other days. This day would break things open, not just companies, but legacies, assumptions, egos. When they arrived, the Alcara building greeted them like it always had, stately, reserved, powerful. The security guard recognized Nevaeh now, not just as a guest or executive's wife, but as herself. "Buenos dias, Señora Alvarez," he said respectfully, eyes widening as she passed him her badge. "Executive Chair, Alcara Group Holdings." His brow lifted slightly. She caught the flicker of realization in his gaze. But he said nothing. He just nodded. "Welcome." As they stepped into the private elevator, Christina handed her a thin tablet. "Your speech is preloaded. We've updated the board list. All documents are signed, notarized. Xavier and the other executives should be arriving in an hour." Nevaeh accepted the tablet, but didn't look at the screen. She already knew what she would say. She didn't need a script to speak her truth. As the elevator ascended, she rested one hand over her heart. This was her one last dance. Not the kind that happened under chandeliers, but the kind that happened just before a crown was placed. The revolving glass doors of Alcara's headquarters glinted in the early morning light, casting thin shadows across the polished marble entrance. As Nevaeh stepped through them, her flats made no sound, but her presence did. The security desk was manned by 2 guards in uniform. One of them glanced up, expecting a vendor or mid-tier manager coming in early. Then he saw the badge. His posture changed instantly. "Buenos dias, Señora Alvarez." Nevaeh paused. "Boardroom level. Any delays?" "None, ma'am. The executive suite has already been unlocked. Conference room Aurelia is secured for you." He buzzed her through without hesitation. Christina followed a few steps behind, tablet in hand, speaking softly. "Legal team will arrive in 20 minutes. Xavier and 3 senior executives are en route. No one from Jordan's camp has shown up yet." Nevaeh nodded. "Perfect. Let's keep it that way. Until I'm seated." The elevator ride up was quiet. Christina adjusted the sleeves of her blazer, nerves quietly moving beneath her efficiency. "But Nevaeh?" She stood composed, eyes forward. The kind of stillness that isn't emptiness, but focus. At the 51st floor, the doors opened with a muted chime. Floor-to-ceiling glass lined the hallway. Alcara's logo shimmered on the opposite wall, metallic, clean, sharp. She walked past it with purpose. The Aurelia conference room was vast. Long mahogany table, 12 high-backed leather chairs, a single orchid in the center. Screens blinked to life across the walls, ready for global connections. Nevaeh set her leather case on the table and opened it with deliberate grace. Inside, 1 folder, 3 embossed notepads, and her gold pen. She didn't need much. She never did. The room filled slowly. Her head legal counsel, Ana Lorca, short, unassuming, brilliant. Vice chair of international partnerships, Mercedes Ibarra, fierce, multilingual, unapologetic. Christina, of course, her anchor. All of them women. All of them hand-picked. The last to enter was Sophia, her daughter's caretaker, dressed today in sleek corporate black. She handed Nevaeh a tablet showing a live feed, Amelie and Elodie still asleep, in their matching pink pajamas, tangled in blankets at the seaside villa. "They're safe. Guard rotation set for the day." "Do you want me to stay with them?" Nevaeh took the tablet gently, her thumb brushing over the image. "Yes. Make pancakes when they wake. Use the honey from the Malaga farmer's market. They like that one." Sophia nodded and slipped away. Nevaeh placed the tablet beside her folder and sat down at the head of the table. Christina took the seat to her left. "How do you feel?" Nevaeh clasped her hands. "Ready." There was no tremble in her voice, no flicker in her eyes. For years she had entered buildings like this through side doors, introduced as Jordan's +1. Smiling, small-talking, pretending to enjoy discussions she wasn't invited to lead. Not today. Today she didn't need permission to speak. She was the reason the room existed. The clock struck 8 a.m. The doors opened again, this time revealing 3 senior board members from Moreno Tech. They paused at the threshold, surprised to see Nevaeh seated where Jordan typically sat during joint meetings. The lead among them, a graying man named Dario, raised his brows. "Señora Moreno?" She corrected him before the door even closed behind them. "Alvarez." Dario blinked. "Of course. My apologies. You're here as representatives of Moreno Tech, correct?" He nodded, his confusion growing. "Yes, but I wasn't informed you'd be leading." "Because you weren't meant to be informed," Nevaeh said, opening her folder and sliding a stack of documents across the table. "These are the finalized acquisition terms. Moreno Tech is now under full control of Alcara Group. I am the executive chair." Dario's mouth opened. Closed. Anna slid another document in front of him, proof of regulatory compliance notarized, acquisition trails and share purchase agreements executed 6 months prior. Nevaeh leaned back. "I trust you understand the gravity of this meeting now." The silence in the room wasn't awkward. It was reverent. For a long time, Nevaeh had been underestimated by design. She'd played the part, the woman who dressed pretty and stayed quiet, the girl from Andalusia who couldn't, had finished business school after the twins came early, the wife who stood beside power but never held it. All of that had been intentional, because the best way to move is quietly. Now, every breath in that room felt like acknowledgement. Every glance was recalibrated. She was no longer invisible, no longer a background figure in Jordan's legend. She was the one with the pen. And when Jordan finally arrived, suit crisp, swagger intact, he would find not a reunion, but a reckoning. The executive floor had been sealed off. No assistants, no outside calls, no interruptions. Inside the Aurelia room, Nevaeh stood by the window, watching the sun rise over Madrid's skyline. The buildings reflected soft amber, brilliant, but not blinding. Christina joined her, 2 cups of espresso in hand. No sugar, just heat and strength. "I sent the final compliance documents to the finance minister's liaison," Christina said. "They've acknowledged receipt." Nevaeh took a slow sip. "Good. I want no holes. There aren't any." They stood in silence for a moment, 2 women in tailored suits, staring down a city that once told them they were only allowed to decorate power, not hold it. "You built something no one saw coming," Christina said quietly. "And you never once needed a headline." Nevaeh's lips tilted. "Why scream when I can sign?" Christina smiled at that, the kind of smile that carries pride and shared history. The two had met 5 years earlier, on a panel about economic mobility for women in southern Spain. Nevaeh had been invited as a guest speaker. Christina, then a rising legal strategist, was moderating. Jordan hadn't attended. He said the topic was too social. Backstage, Christina had looked at Nevaeh and said, "Your story shouldn't be an anecdote in someone else's speech. It should be a case study." That was the start. From that day on, they'd built in layers. Christina helped Nevaeh restructure her trust, set up shell entities in Luxembourg and the Caymans, advised her on non-voting majority shares, silently acquired minority stakes in the companies Jordan bragged about. For every public success Jordan claimed, Nevaeh quietly held equity behind the scenes. Now, Christina stepped to the board table and tapped her tablet. The legal transitions are locked. Stakeholder notifications are scheduled to go out at noon. Moreno Tech executives who don't accept the leadership shift will be subject to their termination clauses. No golden parachutes. You wrote that in yourself. Nevaeh nodded. "I remember. Do you want us to proceed with the press leak after the board meeting?" "No." Christina glanced up. Nevaeh turned from the window. "I want him to tell them." "Jordan?" "Yes. Let him deliver the news." Christina blinked. "That's bold." "It's justice," Nevaeh replied. "He's used my silence to prop himself up. Now he'll use my power to watch himself fall." Christina folded her arms. "And if he refuses?" Nevaeh met her gaze. "He won't. He's not built to carry secrets. He's built to perform. When he finds out who owns him now, his ego will burst at the seams. He'll tell the world in an attempt to shame me." Christina raised a brow. "But the shame won't land." "Exactly." Anna entered with a subtle knock, holding a new document. "We've just received confirmation," she said. Jordan's shares were unknowingly diluted last quarter due to his failure to respond to restructuring notices. He no longer holds a voting majority, even with his silent partners. Christina's eyes widened. That's it. That's the final brick. Nevaeh took the document and ran her fingers over the embossed seal. It's done, Anna said softly. It's over. No, Nevaeh said, voice calm. It's just beginning. Xavier arrived next. He stepped in slowly, adjusting his watch like it might stop time from moving forward. His eyes met Nevaeh's, and he gave her a respectful nod. No smile, no pity, just acknowledgement. Christina eyed him but said nothing. He spoke quietly. He still thinks he's the centerpiece of today's meeting. Nevaeh tilted her head. He'll learn. Xavier approached the table and placed his own folder beside hers. Inside were his resignation letters. From Moreno Tech. From the inner circle. From Jordan's confidence. I'll sign it when the reveal is done, he said. Christina looked between them. You're sure about this? Xavier gave a brief laugh. I've never been more unsure of anything in my life. But I owe her this. Nevaeh didn't correct him. He didn't owe her anything. He owed truth to himself. She returned her gaze to the documents on the table. So many signatures, so many layers, so many years of preparation tucked between the margins of paperwork that looked harmless to the untrained eye. It had taken her nearly a decade to reclaim her name. Now it was time to sit back and watch the throne be built around it. The door buzzed again. Jordan had arrived. Christina picked up her tablet, eyes sharp. You ready? Nevaeh took one last sip of espresso. I was born ready, she said. And then she walked to her seat, the head of the table. The boardroom doors swung open with that familiar sound of confidence trying too hard to announce itself. Jordan Moreno strode in, white suit pressed, shirt collar sharp, cufflinks flashing gold with every motion. He held a latte in one hand, a phone in the other, and walked like the room had been built just to wait for him. Xavier nodded respectfully but said nothing. Christina's gaze didn't flicker. She looked at him like one might look at a dated sculpture, once impressive, now collecting dust. But Nevaeh simply watched. He didn't notice her immediately. Not fully. His eyes skimmed across her presence, mistaking her for background. That was his way. See the outline, never the substance. He dropped his phone onto the table with a loud thud, took a seat 2 chairs away from her, and leaned back with a grin. Morning, everyone, he said, stretching slightly. Hope we're all ready to finalize what might be the biggest win of the quarter. Xavier cleared his throat. You might want to review today's agenda. Jordan waved him off. Already skimmed the summary last night. Merger complete, assets aligned. Time to pop the champagne. Christina folded her arms. Nevaeh spoke. There's been a change. Jordan finally looked at her, really looked. I'm sorry. What? Nevaeh's eyes met his. Calm, certain. There's been a shift in the structure. What you believed to be a merger was, in fact, an acquisition, full and binding. Jordan frowned, half amused. Wait, what the hell are you talking about? Anna slid a document toward him, heavy with seals, stamped to dates and signatures. Christina added, This confirms Moreno Tech's full absorption under Alcara Group Holdings, effective as of this morning. Jordan sat up straighter. That's not possible. Nevaeh tilted her head slightly. It is, and it's done. His fingers darted toward the paper, scanning, flipping, pausing at every confirmation he didn't remember authorizing. Dates matched. Legal signatures matched. Even the international filings were airtight. He looked up slowly. Who's behind this? Nevaeh leaned forward. I am. The silence was profound. Not tense. Not dramatic. Just sharp enough to sting. Jordan stared at her like the world had tilted. You. Yes. He blinked. You're telling me I acquired controlling interest in Alcara 2 years ago through legal intermediaries. Gradually, strategically, quietly. Christina added, Every move was disclosed. You failed to respond to critical communications. By the time you noticed, it was irreversible. Jordan stood up, tossing the paper down. This is insane. No, Nevaeh replied, standing too. This is what happens when you ignore the woman who watched you take credit for what she built. This is what happens when silence isn't submission. Xavier cleared his throat. She's been planning this for years, Jordan. Jordan's eyes turned to him sharply. You knew? Xavier didn't flinch. I chose to see. Jordan shook his head, pacing. No, this can't be legal. It's a hostile act. You manipulated my blind spots. Christina stepped forward. No laws were broken. You signed every waiver. You ignored every clause. You mocked the warning signs. Jordan's hand ran through his hair. You're a mother, he said to Nevaeh. You're not built for this kind of war. She approached him slowly, each step deliberate. I'm a mother, she said softly. That's exactly why I built this. He fell silent. I built this so that my daughters will never have to ask permission to sit at the head of any table, she continued. So that when the world tries to make them small, they'll know how to stand. Jordan backed away, jaw tight. This was supposed to be my legacy. Nevaeh placed both palms flat on the table. Your legacy was built on the backs of people you belittled. You drank from the glass and mocked the ones who filled it. Anna slid the final folder across the table. These are the final operational transfers, all subsidiaries, all assets, all IP. Jordan's voice was barely above a whisper. You betrayed me. Nevaeh didn't blink. No, I watched you betray yourself. The room stayed still as he dropped into the chair, stunned. Eyes clouded, hands slack. For the first time, Jordan Moreno had nothing to say. Nevaeh turned back to her seat and sat. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. This wasn't triumph. This was truth. And truth, when revealed, doesn't need applause. It just needs a table strong enough to carry its weight. Jordan Moreno didn't leave the boardroom immediately after the documents landed. He sat, still, breathless, in his own body. A man surrounded by power who suddenly found himself exiled in the middle of it. He reached for his phone with hands that didn't feel steady anymore. No missed calls, no alerts, just a slowly rising awareness that something had shifted, and he was the last to know. Get me Francisco, he muttered aloud. No one responded. Christina and Anna were already packing up. Xavier had left without a word. Even the interns in the hallway wouldn't meet his gaze as he stepped out. The echo of his shoes, once a confident soundtrack to his entrances, now sounded unsure, an afterthought on floors no longer waiting for him. Downstairs he moved quickly toward his car. The driver greeted him with a polite nod, but offered no congratulations. There were no photographers, no investors waiting to shake his hand. Inside the vehicle, Jordan closed the tinted door and exhaled hard. He called Francisco, his longtime legal advisor. The phone rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. He cursed and tried again. Still, nothing. For a man like Jordan, who once boasted he could reach world leaders, faster than their own staff, the silence was louder than any siren. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. C.R. Christina. He tossed the phone onto the seat beside him, jaw locked. He arrived at the secondary office of Moreno Tech, what he used to call the war room. It had once been filled with custom monitors, noise-canceling glass walls, and a rotating team of consultants and brokers. Now, the receptionist barely looked up when he entered. One of the assistants whispered to another. Someone stifled a laugh. He turned into the main conference area and found his assistant, Marco, already on a call, papers spread in panic, headphones on. Jordan raised his voice. I want the comms team in here. Now. Marco jumped, ended the call mid-sentence and nodded frantically. Jordan moved to the head of the table and checked the internal dashboard on the central screen. It had changed. The Alcara Group logo was now integrated across every product pipeline, every contract revision, every corporate memo. It wasn't subtle. It was a complete sweep. 10 minutes later, 2 members of the public relations team stepped into the room, hesitant. Jordan didn't wait for pleasantries. Damage control plan. Walk me through it. They shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a junior strategist named Marisol, cleared her throat. Sir, with all due respect, there's no scandal. Nothing leaked. There's nothing to control. Jordan narrowed his eyes. Excuse me? The acquisition appears legal, clean, executed without leaks or speculation. The market's adjusting already. Investors aren't pulling out. So why the hell are we just letting it happen? He snapped. The second strategist, Alejandro, spoke carefully. Because the company didn't just change hands, it changed identity. And the new leadership isn't speaking publicly. They're letting the silence speak for itself. Jordan stared at him. The words echoed, letting the silence speak for itself. That was Nevaeh. All over it. He felt something twist in his chest, not just rage, displacement. The company he had bragged about, posed with, stood on stage for, no longer needed his face. Back in his office, he slammed the door shut and paced. Everything was still physically intact. His art on the walls, his framed magazine covers, his private wine fridge, but it all felt borrowed now, temporary. His phone buzzed again. This time it was from Xavier. He opened it. You never saw her because you never looked past yourself. No other words, no apology, no insult, just the mirror Jordan had never dared to face. He opened his laptop, determined to draft his own statement. A letter, an explanation, something that would reframe this story in his voice. But as he typed, his fingers froze. What could he say? That his wife outplayed him? That the girl he once mocked in front of his colleagues now owned his legacy? He stared at the blinking cursor, and for the first time in years, Jordan Moreno had no words. By late morning, Alcara's main boardroom had filled beyond capacity. Not just executives and partners, but investors, stakeholders, legal observers, and media liaisons stood lined. Along the walls, curious faces glancing over printed agendas marked ownership transition briefing. There was tension in the air. Not fear, not speculation, just curiosity. The kind that happens when a narrative starts to shift. At exactly 11 a.m., the double doors opened. Nevia Alvarez entered. No fanfare, no security escort, no assistant whispering notes in her ear. Just her. And she didn't walk in like she was owed the room. She walked in like she owned the room. Her hair, once tucked back for strategy, now flowed in soft waves past her shoulders. She wore a scarlet camisole beneath a perfectly cut black blazer, sharp, elegant, unapologetic. Fitted slacks framed her stride. No jewelry except a gold pendant resting below her collarbone. The only sound in the room was the deliberate click of her heels. Jordan, already seated near the end of the table, looked up, startled. His lips parted, but no sound came. Xavier was standing by the windows, arms crossed. He saw her and exhaled, relief, admiration, maybe something else. Christina stepped in after her, flanked by Anna and Mercedes, carrying a sealed portfolio. The women took their seats on the right side of the table. Nevea walked past every stunned executive who had once shaken Jordan's hand and offered her only nods. Past the board chair who once introduced her as Jordan's charming better half. She reached the head of the table and paused. Then slowly, deliberately, she removed her blazer and placed it on the chair. Beneath it, the red camisole stood bold against her skin, power without pretense. The color of decision, the color of consequence. Someone cleared their throat nervously. Papers rustled. A few whispered to one another. Nevea didn't speak immediately. She let her presence settle in first. Then she opened the leather folder Anna had laid before her. These are the final acquisition documents for Moreno Tech and all its global subsidiaries, she said clearly, voice steady. As of today, Alcara Group Holdings assumes full ownership and leadership control. All executive authority now flows through this board, chaired by myself. She looked up, eyes sweeping across the room. Not cold, not performative, just undeniable. Jordan stood suddenly. You're not doing this. Nevea turned to him. I already have. He stepped forward. This is a stunt. You don't belong at this table. Anna slid a paper across the table. The relevant authority filings are signed, sealed, and cleared through financial and regulatory bodies in 3 jurisdictions. You can challenge them if you wish, but the burden of proof will be yours. I built this company, Jordan snapped. Nevea looked at him, head slightly tilted. You branded it. You paraded it. But I built its future while you were busy polishing your name. He shook his head, eyes wide. You used me. No, she said. You ignored me. There's a difference. There was silence. Then someone, one of the senior partners, leaned forward. I think what we all want to understand, he began slowly, is how this shift occurred without any breach or leak. Nevea answered without hesitation, because I didn't need noise. I needed results. Murmurs around the table. Anna opened her own folder. We have detailed briefings available for anyone requesting review. But be clear, this was not an ambush. This was succession. Long overdue. Someone from marketing, visibly unsure, raised her hand. What does this mean for branding? Nevea turned to her. It means authenticity. No more empty headlines. No more front-facing veneers. We lead with value now, not vanity. A ripple of reaction moved across the room. Christina stepped in. Every division will receive transition support. No one loses their position unless they make themselves incompatible with the culture we're building. Which is? Asked a young executive from digital infrastructure. Nevaeh met his gaze directly. Excellence without ego. Jordan spoke again, quieter this time. Do you think people will follow you? Nevaeh didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned toward the window behind her, where the Alcara logo reflected in the neighboring glass tower. Then she looked back at him. They already are. Xavier stepped forward, placing his resignation folder on the table. Effective immediately, I stepped down from my post at Moreno Tech. I remain available to advise under Nevaeh's new leadership, if requested. The silence that followed felt like a collective exhale, like a chapter closing without words. Jordan sat back down. For the first time, he wasn't arguing. He was realizing this wasn't temporary. This wasn't performance. This was permanent. And the woman sitting at the head of the table wasn't his shadow. She was his replacement. The boardroom settled. There was no more shifting in chairs, no whispers, no glances toward Jordan for cues or reactions. Everyone was looking at Nevaeh now. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't gesture grandly. She just stood, hands lightly resting on the back of her chair, her posture relaxed but rooted. My name is Nevaeh Alvarez, she began. Daughter of a seamstress, widow of silence, mother to 2 brilliant daughters, and the woman who watched a company grow without ever forgetting what it cost. She looked around the table, pausing to meet eyes deliberately. 10 years ago, I walked into this industry through a side door. No formal invite, no grand entrance. I sat in the corner of meeting rooms while my ideas were borrowed and repackaged. I was told to smile more, speak less. I was told my value was decorative. A few heads lowered. But while some of you laughed at the way I carried myself, I was studying how you moved. I was watching where you invested, who you listened to, which risks you feared. She stepped around the chair and moved toward the end of the table, toward Jordan. Jordan Moreno was once my husband. He told me I couldn't run a business because I couldn't keep a house quiet. He said I dressed too loudly to be taken seriously. He told rooms full of men that I was a charity case. Jordan didn't lift his head. He stared straight ahead. And still, Nevaeh continued, I stayed quiet because I knew power was patient, and the moment I spoke, I would never need to raise my voice again. She turned and walked back to her place at the head. Anna passed her the final document. She signed it without hesitation. With one motion of the pen, Jordan's title was removed from the company's governing structure. She closed the folder. Then she looked up. Your time at this table, she said gently, has ended. Jordan stood slowly. It wasn't the arrogant motion of a man standing to reclaim space. It was slower than that. He looked at her, at the people surrounding her, then back at the chair he once ruled from. I gave everything to this company, he said quietly. I built it from nothing. Nevaeh's gaze didn't soften, but it didn't harden either. You built your image, she replied. The rest of us built the infrastructure. You tricked me. No, she said. You taught me. He swallowed, hands clenched. You turned everyone against me. She shook her head. They were never with you, she said. They were afraid of what you could take from them. I offered them something else, a chance to build something that didn't rely on who screamed loudest. Silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, Jordan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, folded photo. He placed it on the table. It was old, creased at the corners, edges faded. It was a picture of him, Nevaeh, and the twins, back when they were babies, on a beach, before the suits, before the titles. Nevaeh looked down at it, her lips pressing together. She said nothing. He did not ask for forgiveness, and she did not offer it. When he turned and walked out of the room, no one followed him. There was no farewell, no applause, just a door that closed quietly behind him. Back at the head of the table, Nevaeh remained standing. Christina leaned in. Do you want me to notify press for the afternoon window? Nevaeh thought for a moment. Then she shook her head. Let them find out on their own. Let the world ask questions. I've given them something worth answering. Anna smiled. It's done. No, Nevaeh said. Now we begin. The board adjourned. Executives left quietly, murmuring to each other, not with confusion, but with renewed clarity, not gossip, but but respect. Xavier lingered at the door. He watched her gather her things. The red camisole, the steady hands, the woman he once saw as an ornament now outshining every nameplate in the room. He didn't speak until the room was nearly empty. "You didn't just take his seat," he said. She looked up. "You redefined what the seat was worth." Nevaeh stepped forward, picking up the photo Jordan had left behind. She folded it carefully, then placed it face down into her bag. "Legacy," she said softly, "isn't what you leave behind. It's what you live to build." The sun was beginning to lower over the cliffs of Malaga, casting long strokes of amber across the shoreline. The air was thick with salt, breeze, and memory. Nevaeh stood barefoot on the stone terrace of her villa, the wind tangling in her curls. The red of her camisole exchanged for a soft ivory robe, cinched at the waist. She held a glass of Rioja in one hand, her other hand resting lightly against the balcony rail. Below her, waves whispered along the shore, soft, steady, honest. Inside the villa, all was quiet. Christina had left hours earlier after updating the villa security team and delivering a warm meal. The twins had been dropped off by Sophia and were now upstairs in the west wing, sound asleep after a day of painting and puzzles. It was the first time in months that Nevaeh didn't hear her name spoken with either need or intent. No emails, no negotiations, no applause, just the sea and the sound of her own breathing. She stepped away from the railing and walked through the open glass doors into the living space. The villa was everything the penthouse wasn't. Organic wood, wide spaces, linen curtains fluttering like sighs. There were no sharp edges here, no mirrors angled to impress. This space had been designed in silence, just like her plan. A refuge constructed slowly, in moments stolen between obligation and ambition. She had funded it herself, under an alias, working with a quiet architect who asked no questions and sent no press releases. There was no marble, no chandeliers, but there was peace, and for the first time in a long time, she felt worthy of it. She walked across the cool tiles to a leather-bound book resting on a side table. Inside were pages the twins had drawn, crayon figures, shaky hearts, stick-legged dogs. She flipped through it, smiling. On the last page, in bright blue marker, one of them had written, "We love you, Mama. You're the boss of the world." She closed the book gently, pressing her fingers to the cover. Not boss of the world, just hers, just theirs, and that was enough. As the sun dipped lower, Nevaeh lit the fireplace, not for warmth, but for atmosphere. The flicker of flame added a softness to the walls, a rhythm to the silence. She poured another glass of wine and curled up on the couch. She wasn't tired, but her body was learning how to rest again. Every part of her had been trained for defense, shoulders tight, back straight, eyes watchful. Years of enduring humiliation while pretending to admire the hands that inflicted it. Now she was learning how to release. Not just Jordan, but the version of herself who stayed with him. The version who swallowed every insult and called it patience. A soft knock on the glass door behind her broke the stillness. She didn't flinch. She stood, slowly and without hurry, then walked to the source of the knock. Outside, framed by the last traces of sunlight and the soft sound of tide, stood Xavier. Soaked, his shirt clung to his skin. His jaw was clenched. His eyes, stormy but steady, met hers through the glass. Nevaeh opened the door. Neither of them spoke. Water dripped from his sleeves onto the terrace floor. He held nothing but a folder. "I didn't know," he said finally. "Not the full weight of what he did to you. Not how deeply he erased you." Nevaeh crossed her arms. "You didn't ask." "I didn't want to see it," he admitted. "Because I admired him. Because I wanted to believe that loyalty meant silence." She stepped aside and gestured him in. "You're soaked. I deserve to be. That doesn't mean you have to stay wet." He walked in. She handed him a towel from the hallway cabinet. He dried his face, then offered her the folder. She took it, opened it, and found resignation papers, formal, dated, complete. "You're free," she said, scanning it. "I don't want to run from him," Xavier said. "I want to stand with you." Her gaze lifted slowly. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't begging. He was just present. The fire behind her crackled softly. Shadows played along the corners of the room. She turned away, placed the folder on the table, and poured him a glass of wine. He took it, held it without drinking. Nevaeh sat again, this time not curling up, but leaning back with space beside her. Xavier took the seat slowly. They didn't touch. Not yet. But the silence between them no longer held weight. It held possibility. The rain arrived gradually, first as mist dancing across the terrace, then building into steady drops that tapped against the villa's tall windows like secrets too long held. Inside, the fireplace warmed the air, casting a soft amber glow across the living room. Nevaeh remained seated on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, glass still half full. Xavier sat beside her, dry now except for the damp edges of his sleeves. His jacket rested on a nearby chair, abandoned. The silence between them had shifted since he stepped in, not sharp, not hesitant, but watchful. As if both were waiting for a cue neither could name. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I knew he spoke about you like an accessory," Xavier said at last. "But I didn't realize how much of you he tried to erase." Nevaeh's voice was calm. "He didn't erase me. He tried to mute me. And now you've raised the volume on an entire industry." She gave a quiet smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I didn't want revenge," she said. "I just wanted air." He turned to look at her. "And now that you've breathed, I'm learning not to hold it anymore." A log in the fireplace shifted, sending sparks upward. Outside, the rain began to drum harder, steady and rhythmic. The villa felt sealed in time, neither night nor morning, just suspended. Xavier's gaze dropped to the rug. "I kept telling myself I wasn't part of the problem because I wasn't the one laughing at you. But I stood in those rooms. I said nothing. You thought staying neutral made you innocent," she said. He nodded. "You weren't the worst man in the room, Xavier," she continued. "But you weren't my ally either." He met her eyes. "I want to be." She didn't speak, just looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You don't owe me that," he added. "But I needed to say it." The wine was gone. She poured more, just for herself this time. He didn't reach for his. "Why did you come?" she asked, voice softer now. He exhaled slowly. "Because after the meeting, after watching you stand in front of everyone, like that, I couldn't go home and pretend nothing changed." She took a sip, waiting. He pressed on. "For so long I convinced myself you were fine, that the marriage worked because you smiled at the right moments, because you didn't complain. I wasn't allowed to," she said flatly. "And when you started changing, going quiet, withdrawing, I thought you were just growing cold. I was growing tired," she said. "Tired of being small so he could feel big." Xavier's voice dropped. "I see you now." She turned toward him, eyes locked. "I see all of you," he said. "And it's more than I ever let myself believe existed." There was no sudden kiss, no dramatic confession, just a long pause where the fire crackled and the storm outside pressed closer. Then, very slowly, Nevaeh shifted closer. Not all the way, just enough. "Stay," she said. One word, an offering. Xavier didn't answer with words. He reached for her hand, gently, carefully, as if unsure if he had the right. She let him. Their fingers touched like chords finding tune. And in that touch, something opened. Not urgency, recognition. The storm climbed higher. Thunder rolled faintly in the distance. But inside, time slowed. Nevaeh's head rested lightly on his shoulder now, her body still, her breath deepening. Xavier didn't move. He let her lean, let her exist. No expectation, no apology, just presence. Later, as the rain softened to a hush, she spoke without lifting her head. "You knew me as his wife." He nodded. "I want you to know me as more." "I already do," he said. And then, after a moment, "Can I stay? Not just tonight." Nevaeh pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. "You can stay," she said, "but not as a shadow of who you were." He understood. She didn't need a man who admired her strength from afar. She needed someone who could hold space for her without needing to claim it. And in that moment, Xavier decided to become that man. The fire had died down to a soft glow, its flickering embers the only source of light in the room. Xavier's hand still held Nevaeh's, their palms warmed not just by skin, but by silence unbroken, by trust unspoken. She shifted slightly on the couch, and he looked at her, not for permission, but for confirmation. Nevaeh met his gaze, and she didn't look away. They rose without a word, together. Her fingers brushed his, then laced between them as she led him through the hallway, past the framed drawings of her daughters, past the quiet rhythm of their sleeping breaths upstairs. Past all the years of performance and pretense, she opened the door to her bedroom. Not the marital suite she once shared in the penthouse. This room had been designed by her. Soft amber walls, a large bed with linen sheets, a window that opened directly to the sea, letting in the scent of salt and wind. She turned to face him, and then, slowly, she undressed. No show, no fear, no hesitation, just a woman removing what the world once used to cover her worth. First her robe, letting it slide from her shoulders to the floor. Then her camisole, bearing the skin that once felt objectified but now felt hers. Then her underthings, until nothing remained but breath. Xavier watched, but not like Jordan once did, consuming, assuming. Xavier looked with awe, with reverence. He reached for her, but didn't touch. Not yet, not until she nodded. He stepped forward, and his fingers gently traced her cheek, then her collarbone. Slowly, as if reading her story through touch. "You're not broken," he said. "I never was," she replied. They kissed, softly at first, a brush of warmth, then again, deeper, slower, his hands resting at her waist, not pulling, just holding. She guided him back toward the bed. When he undressed, he did it without flourish, without dominance. Just a man revealing himself, not claiming space, but sharing it. When their bodies met, it wasn't firestorm, it was warmth that built in waves. He took his time. His lips mapped every scar, every curve, every place that once carried shame. He kissed the inner bend of her arm, the space behind her knee, the line of her spine. He paused at her stomach, pressing his mouth through the place that had once carried life. Nevaeh arched, not in pain, not in need, but in recognition. "You're the first person," she whispered, "who's ever touched me without trying to take something." Xavier met her eyes. "I'm not here to take." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm here to stay." The rhythm between them was slow, almost sacred. There was no script, no rush, only discovery. When Nevaeh came undone beneath him, it wasn't with silence. It was with a cry she didn't hold back. A cry layered in years of silence, suppression, denial, longing, grief, and finally, relief. He held her through it, didn't shush, didn't demand. He simply stayed. Later they lay side by side, her leg draped over his, her breath still steadying. The window remained open. The sea hummed. Her skin glistened in the faint light, her curls messy, her body still glowing from the touch of someone who saw, not shaped, her. Xavier brushed his thumb over her wrist. "I don't know what this becomes," he said. "Neither do I," she answered. "But it's real," he said. "It's mine," she corrected. He smiled. "Ours, if you want." Nevaeh didn't answer right away. She looked toward the window, then back at the man beside her. "I want everything," she said, "but only if I never have to shrink to receive it." He leaned forward, kissing her shoulder. "You never will." The morning air at the villa was crisp, laced with the scent of sea lavender and pine. The storm had passed, but the sky remained gray, a warning without thunder. Nevaeh stood in the open kitchen, dressed in a slate blue wrap dress, barefoot on the cool terracotta tiles. A soft jazz instrumental played in the background while she flipped warm crepes onto a platter. Amelie and Elodie sat at the island, giggling over the way their whipped cream swirled like clouds. She was halfway through pouring their orange juice when Sophia walked in with a furrowed brow and an open phone in her hand. "Ma'am," Sophia said carefully, "you need to see this." Nevaeh wiped her hands and took the device. It was a news alert, one of the larger outlets. Moreno disputes hostile takeover, claims coercion and malicious intent. Below the headline was a photograph of Jordan, wearing a dark suit, face set in somber defiance, standing on the steps of a civil court building. He appeared injured, not physically, but in pride. There were quotes from a brief press appearance. Heavily manipulated deal structures, a betrayal of trust, an attempt to erase a man's legacy using confidential information acquired through personal proximity. Nevaeh handed the phone back. "Is he suing you?" Sophia asked. "No," Nevaeh said, calmly pouring the juice. "He's trying to scare me." 2 hours later, Christina arrived. She didn't knock, just walked in with urgency and a folder under her arm. Jordan's legal team filed an injunction request. He wants to freeze all Alcara accounts tied to the acquisition. He's claiming ethical misconduct and undue influence. No solid basis, but just enough noise to trigger delays. Nevaeh looked up from her laptop. So he's gambling on press pressure? Christina nodded. Exactly. If investors start getting nervous, he thinks they'll side with whoever screams louder. I'm not going to shout. You don't have to, Christina said. We already preempted this scenario. Anna's already filed a counter-motion. All documentation's clean. Timeline is traceable. There's no angle he can work. Then let him run his theater, Nevaeh said, leaning back in her chair. Christina hesitated. Are you sure? We could issue a press statement, control the narrative. Nevaeh closed her laptop slowly. He's used to people panicking. We don't. Later that afternoon, Nevaeh sat on the back patio with a cup of espresso and her journal open on her lap. The twins were drawing sidewalk chalk portraits beside the pool, Elodie giving, Nevaeh a superhero cape, Amelie scribbling crowns in pink and purple. Her phone vibrated beside her. It was an incoming call from Anna. Nevaeh answered without hesitation. We have confirmation, Anna said. His injunction was dismissed. Judge reviewed the acquisition timeline and denied the freeze. Jordan's request didn't even meet minimum burden of proof. Did he look surprised? Reports say he didn't speak when he left. Nevaeh gave a soft hum of satisfaction. Anything else? There's a follow-up motion pending, but we'll handle it. Public support is trending in your favor now. People are starting to talk, not just about Jordan's loss, but your rise. Nevaeh thanked her and ended the call. She looked toward her daughters, who were now trying to draw a dolphin in the corner of the tile. Then she opened her journal and wrote 4 simple words. The house didn't fall. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Xavier returned from a short trip into town. He carried a basket of fresh fruit and a local newspaper folded under his arm. He placed it gently on the counter. Nevaeh glanced at it. The headline wasn't about Jordan. It was about her. The quiet queen of Alcara, Nevaeh Alvarez, steps into light. Below was a photograph taken from the boardroom reveal. She stood mid-speech, hands open, face calm, blazer strong. She raised an eyebrow. Queen? Xavier grinned. They had to call you something. She folded the paper neatly. I'd rather be a builder. You've already built it, he said. Now you get to reign. Later, when she tucked the twins in, Amelie whispered, Will Daddy be mad at us? Nevaeh smoothed the blanket over her. No, she said softly. This isn't about you. None of it is. It's between grown-ups. A lady stirred. He said you're not supposed to have companies. Nevaeh kissed her forehead. He said a lot of things that weren't true. The girls nodded slowly, letting their eyes close. As Nevaeh stood at the doorway watching them drift into sleep, her heart tightened, not in pain, but in determination. She wasn't just protecting a company. She was protecting a future. The following morning began with filtered sunlight slipping through the villa's white linen curtains. Nevaeh sat in the study, reviewing calendar briefs when Christina's call came through. We're ready, Christina said. Are you sure you want to go through with it? Nevaeh didn't hesitate. Yes. Release the files. All of them? Especially the boardroom recordings. Christina's voice tightened. He won't recover from this. That's not my concern, Nevaeh said. My concern is clarity. She hung up and opened her email. Within minutes, the scheduled releases began rolling out. Quietly, legally, strategically. No gossip blogs, no clickbait headlines. Just unfiltered footage, time-stamped, watermarked. The world wasn't asked to believe her. They were simply shown the truth. The first clip was from a shareholder strategy meeting held 8 months ago. Jordan sat at the head of the table, drink in hand. My wife keeps talking about contribution, like she even knows what equity means, he said, laughing. Xavier, off camera, cleared his throat. Jordan waved him off. She's good at looking sharp in a dress. That's about all the contribution I've seen. More laughter. The second clip, a cocktail event in Valencia. A waiter recorded it, unknowingly. Jordan, half drunk, spoke into a circle of executives. I married Nevaeh because she was easy to manage, pretty enough to show off, quiet enough to ignore. The third, a voicemail sent to a junior partner who failed to return a report on time. You're as slow as Nevaeh trying to spell licensing. Useless. By mid-afternoon, the media had picked up the threads. But Nevaeh never issued a statement. She never needed to. The footage spoke louder than any defense. News anchors shifted from questioning her methods to examining his legacy. Public opinion tilted swiftly, not because she demanded sympathy, But because she offered proof, Christina sent her a message. He's trending, for all the wrong reasons. Anna followed up with a screenshot of a forum thread titled, "From Mockery to Majesty, the Neve Files." At a private club in Madrid, Jordan watched the clips on his phone. He was seated alone in a corner booth, scotch in hand, ignored by men who once begged to buy him dinner. Every scroll revealed another headline. Tech CEO's humiliating rants go viral. Newly appointed chairwoman outs years of disrespect with receipts. He lowered the phone. The walls of the club felt closer now, the air heavier. His name, once currency, had become a liability. Back at the villa, Nevaeh stood at the kitchen counter slicing oranges. The twins were playing in the garden. Xavier was helping them build a tent from old bedsheets. Christina arrived, tablet in hand. "No retraction from his team yet," she said. Nevaeh handed her a slice of fruit. "They won't retract. They'll disappear." Christina paused. "You're calm." "I'm not calm," Nevaeh replied. "I'm prepared." That night, just after dinner, Nevaeh received a message on her private line. An unknown number, one sentence. "You didn't have to destroy me." She read it once, then again. She didn't respond. She simply archived the message and turned off her phone. Because she hadn't destroyed him. She had just stopped protecting him. The sun was sinking low, casting a soft bronze haze over the coastline. Nevaeh sat beneath the pergola, a light shawl wrapped over her shoulders, a book open on her lap, though she hadn't turned a page in several minutes. She sensed the presence before the security system even notified her. The faint hum of an approaching vehicle, the weight in the air shifting. She stood slowly and walked toward the gate, past the garden, past the sand, washed stones, past the chalk drawings still fresh from her daughter's play. Christina was already there, standing between the guard and the man who once wore her name like a trophy. Jordan. His shirt was wrinkled, his face tired. He carried no briefcase, no entourage, just a worn envelope in one hand and a printed photo in the other. Christina turned to Nevaeh. "Do you want him removed?" Nevaeh studied him carefully. His eyes were not defiant. They were searching. "Let him in," she said. "Only to the front walk." Christina gave a curt nod to the guard, then stepped aside. Jordan walked forward slowly, stopping a few feet from Nevaeh. He didn't speak immediately. He looked smaller somehow, not in height, but in weight. The bravado had evaporated. His shoulders no longer held performance, just fatigue. He lifted the photo. It was the same one from the boardroom. The beach day. Nevaeh. Him. The twins, smaller then, cheeks full, arms reaching. "I've been looking at this photo for hours," he said. Nevaeh remained silent. "I can't remember what day it was," he continued. "I thought I could. But I can't." She waited. He looked up, voice quieter. "Were you always planning this?" "No," she said, "but I was always preparing for something." He nodded slowly. "I lost everything," he said. "No," she corrected gently. "You gave it away, one insult at a time." His hand tightened around the envelope. "I didn't see you. You saw me," she replied. "You just didn't think I could do anything without you." There was no anger in her tone, no heat. Jordan's voice cracked. "I wasn't supposed to be the villain. This isn't a story," she said. "It's a consequence." He looked down. "I don't want the company back. I know. I just want to see them." "The girls," Nevaeh folded her arms. "You saw them when it was convenient, when it made you look good." "I know," he whispered. "I want to try again." She stepped forward, only slightly. "Trying again doesn't erase what was done. You were not just absent, you were cruel. They remember the way you made me feel." "I made you small," he admitted. She nodded. "And now you're the one asking for space." He swallowed. "They're still my daughters, and I will never keep them from knowing that," she said. "But their safety comes first. Their peace comes before your redemption." He didn't argue, because there was nothing left to argue. He extended the envelope. "What is it?" "A letter. For them. If you decide it's safe for them to read." She took it without touching his hand. "I'll read it first," she said. "If there's anything in it meant to twist their loyalty, they'll never see it." He nodded. "Fair." Nevaeh looked up at him one last time. "You're not banned, Jordan. But you no longer get to walk through gates without earning your place." The guard returned to escort him back. He looked over his shoulder once. Nevaeh didn't wave, didn't turn away. She watched until the car disappeared down the private road. Christina joined her moments later. You handled that with more grace than I would have allowed. Nevaeh looked at the envelope in her hand. It wasn't grace, she said. It was closure. Later that night, as the twins slept and the wind picked up over the sea, Nevaeh stood at the terrace alone. The letter sat on the table beside her, unopened. Xavier stepped out quietly, placing a warm mug beside her. You okay? She nodded. He came. I know. I didn't hate him, she said. Not today. You don't have to. You just have to move forward. She reached for his hand, and as he laced his fingers through hers, she whispered, I already have. The issue hit shelves on a Monday morning. Nevaeh's photo on the cover of Forbes España stopped traffic at kiosks across Madrid and Barcelona. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't posed with a backdrop of wealth. She stood in front of a steel and glass building, arms folded, hair loose, face soft, but immovable. From silence to sovereignty, Nevaeh Alvarez breaks the mold of leadership. Xavier laid the magazine on the kitchen table before she even woke up. The twins were finishing breakfast, chattering about their upcoming art fair at school. Jam smudged one corner of the page, but Nevaeh didn't mind. She picked it up with calm fingers, looked at it for a long moment, then set it back down. You don't want to read it? Xavier asked, pouring her coffee. I already know what it says, she answered. And for once, so does everyone else. At Alcara Group headquarters, the energy was different. Not louder, smarter. The corridors, once lined with portraits of male founders and stock tickers, now featured rotating images of current initiatives, women-led startups, education grants, clean tech partnerships in sub-Saharan regions. The culture had changed, not because of policy, but presence. Nevaeh didn't hover. She didn't perform. But every time she stepped through those doors, the temperature shifted. People stood taller. The silence wasn't nervous. It was focused. She chaired meetings not with speeches, but with questions. And when she spoke, every pen stopped moving. Christina stopped by her office around noon, holding a neat stack of printed articles. Press coverage is widening, she said. International interest. 3 networks want exclusive interviews. Nevaeh raised an eyebrow. Why now? Because you didn't chase them, Christina said, sitting across from her. You changed something without announcing it. That makes people look harder. Nevaeh flipped through one of the articles. She didn't come in like a storm. She came in like a tide and reshaped the shore. She placed the paper down, lips pressed into a faint curve. I'm not interested in interviews. Christina nodded. Then what are you interested in? Nevaeh looked out the window for a moment. Replication, she said. Christina blinked. Come again. I don't want to be a one-off story. I want to build systems, scholarships, incubators, quiet machinery for women who are still waiting in rooms no one sees them in. Christina smiled slowly. You're talking about legacy. That evening, back at the villa, Xavier walked into her study while she reviewed architectural plans for a new foundation headquarters in Seville. He held a small brown envelope in his hand. What's that? She asked. He handed it to her. Something came in the mail. Nevaeh opened it carefully. Inside was a single, crisp certificate. Top 50 most influential leaders in Europe, recognized for transformational integrity. She set it aside, then reached for a notebook instead. She flipped to a blank page and wrote, Influence is what they call you when you stop asking for permission. Later, while brushing her daughter's hair before bed, Amelie asked, Are you famous now? Nevaeh paused, brush in hand. Some people say that, she answered. But what matters is what you say. Elodie tilted her head. We say you're strong. Nevaeh smiled. That's better than famous. And you're bossy, Amelie added with a grin. That too. They giggled, wrapping their arms around her neck in tandem. In their eyes, there were no magazine covers, no contracts, no acquisitions. Just a mother who showed up, who stayed, who made space. The courtyard of Escuela de Alas, the School of Wings, was buzzing with excitement. Girls between the ages of 6 and 16 moved through wide, sun-drenched. Corridors lined with murals, their laughter echoing off sandstone walls. Flags from over a dozen countries hung above the central atrium. Every color, every language, every dream. At the entrance, a carved plaque read, For every girl who was told to wait. For every girl who stopped asking. For every girl who stayed quiet so others could speak louder. This is your space. Below it, in smaller script, was her signature, N. Alvarez. Nevaeh stood quietly near the edge of the welcome hall, dressed in soft cream slacks and a linen blouse. She watched as her daughters, hand in hand, skipped past an installation made of books shaped like wings. Christina stepped up beside her. "We're at capacity," she said, glancing at her tablet. 300 students. Applications for next term have already doubled projections. Good, Nevaeh said. This is going to change everything. I don't want everything, she replied. I want the quiet things to matter again. Christina gave a small nod. They already do. In the auditorium, the ceremony was about to begin. Nevaeh walked to the podium as students, faculty, and guests took their seats. There were no flashing lights, no press gallery. She had requested it that way. Just faces, just the ones who needed to hear. She waited until the room hushed before speaking. I won't be long, she said, voice even. A soft chuckle rippled across the audience. She smiled faintly, then continued, Some of you come from places where your voices were not considered necessary. Some of you were told that leading was a privilege you had to earn by imitating someone louder. She let the words hang. But here, your voice begins with belief. Your leadership starts with choice. And your power will grow in places where no one has to lose for you to rise. Applause broke gently. She didn't bask in it. Instead, she stepped down, greeted the first row of students, and sat with her daughters in the third. After the ceremony, Amelie tugged at her sleeve. Can we see our classroom? You won't start until next week, Nevaeh reminded her gently. But we just want a peek. She smiled and nodded. Okay, just a peek. They walked together down a lavender-scented hallway, lined with quotes from women across history, some famous, some forgotten, all remembered here. In their assigned classroom, 2 desks had been labeled Amelie Alvarez, Eladi Alvarez. The girls squealed with delight. Nevaeh looked around. There were no whiteboards filled with equations just yet. No syllabi printed. Just sunlight pouring through tall windows, baskets of art supplies, and desks arranged in circles. Not rows. Because this wasn't a place for obedience. It was a place for collaboration. Outside, Xavier waited in the garden. He watched through the glass as the girls explored their future. When Nevaeh joined him, he handed her a water bottle and a warm, napkin-wrapped sandwich. I figured you didn't eat lunch. You figured right. They sat on the bench together, overlooking the sculpture of wings made from recycled steel anchored in concrete. You did this, he said. She took a bite of her sandwich, chewed slowly, then said, We did this. He smiled, but shook his head. No, I built spreadsheets. You built a sanctuary. As they prepared to leave, a small girl in a navy dress ran up to Nevaeh. Miss Alvarez? Nevaeh turned, kneeling to meet her gaze. Thank you, the girl whispered, for this place. I never thought I'd go to a school where people looked like me. Nevaeh's throat tightened. She touched the girl's shoulder. You belong in every room you step into, she said. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. The girl nodded fiercely and ran back to her group. Xavier wrapped an arm around Nevaeh's waist as they walked toward the car. That's legacy, he said. No, she whispered. That's the beginning. The first thing Xavier did every morning was make coffee. Not because Nevaeh asked him to, because he wanted to. He'd rise before the sun cracked over the sea, wrap a blanket around his shoulders, and tiptoe down the Via's wide stone hallway, careful not to wake the girls or disturb the hushed stillness of early hours. The kitchen welcomed him like it had grown used to his presence, his half-folded newspaper on the counter, the orange peels he always forgot to throw out, the half-spilled cinnamon from his last attempt at adding flair. He never got the spice balance quite right, but Nevaeh drank every cup anyway. By 6:45, the smell of fresh brew would drift toward the bedroom. Nevaeh would stir, not rushed, not jolted, just slowly returning to a world that no longer demanded her guard. Sometimes she'd pad barefoot into the kitchen wearing one of his shirts. Other times she'd remain in bed and wait, knowing he'd bring the cup to her, always with the same line. You've conquered empires, now it's time to conquer the morning. And she'd smile, because it was never about coffee. It was about showing up. On this particular morning, she sat on the patio, hair tied up, one leg folded beneath her, laptop open on her knees. Xavier sat across from her, barefoot, reading an article aloud from his phone about a regional trade shift her foundation might benefit from. His voice was easy, familiar. She barely looked up when she said, "Add that to the strategy memo for next Thursday's board meeting." He nodded, thumbs tapping a note into his phone. Already done. They worked like that sometimes. No tension, no competition, no need to prove intellect. Just two minds aligned. When she paused to sip her coffee, he asked, "What's the smile for?" She glanced at him. "You listen," she said. "Not just to what I say, but what I don't." Xavier set his phone down and leaned back. "You never needed someone to complete you, Nevaeh." "No," she agreed. "I needed someone who didn't shrink when I expanded." Later that morning, after the girls left for school with Sophia, the villa settled into its adult rhythm. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. Nevaeh walked back into the bedroom and found him folding the laundry she'd abandoned 2 days ago. He was terrible at it. Shirts creased in odd places, socks mismatched, but he kept doing it. She leaned against the doorframe, watching. "You know I'll redo all of that, right?" He didn't look up. "I know. But this way, I can say I tried." She crossed the room, took the poorly folded shirt from his hands and dropped it onto the bed. Then she kissed him. Soft at first, then not. They moved together with practiced patience. There was no performance here, no need for urgency. He kissed the line of her collarbone as she pulled her shirt over her head. She traced the dip of his back as he leaned in. Their movements were slow, their breathing synced. He touched her like an artist, not with precision, but with presence. No territory was rushed, no part of her body treated like a shortcut. When they came together, it was not an explosion. It was recognition, the kind that says, you don't need to be understood to be adored. You don't need to be perfect to be wanted. You don't need to be silent to be safe. Afterward, they lay tangled in linen sheets, the window cracked open to let in the scent of citrus trees and sea spray. She lay on his chest, fingers tracing lazy circles across his ribs. "Do you miss your old life?" she asked softly. Xavier was quiet for a beat. "No," he said. "I just didn't realize how small it was until I stepped out of it." She looked up at him. "You were part of what enabled him. I know. And now you're with me." He didn't flinch. "I know that too. Do you ever feel guilty?" "All the time. But you still show up." "I will, every morning." With cinnamon too strong and socks folded wrong, Nevaeh smiled, settling back into him. "Then we're good." At noon, the two of them walked down to the shore, barefoot in the sand. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. He reached down and took her hand. She let him. And for the first time in a long, complicated life, it felt like enough. It started with a drawing. Amelie was the one who brought it over, crayon smudged and proud. She held it up to Nevaeh one Sunday afternoon, as sunlight spilled through. The villa windows and the scent of cinnamon toast lingered in the air. "Look, Mommy," she beamed. "It's us." Nevaeh took the paper, heart already warming. 2 girls in pigtails. A smiling woman in a red dress. A big yellow sun in the sky. But there was something else, an empty stick figure standing beside them. It had no face, no color. Just the word Daddy, scribbled above in shaky handwriting. Nevaeh blinked. She folded the paper carefully. "Sweetheart," she said, "this is beautiful. You did such a good job." Amelie's grin faded a little. "But Mommy, where's our daddy?" It was not the first time they'd asked, but this time felt different. This time, a lady walked in with her arms crossed and her lip trembling. "Everyone at school has one," she mumbled. "Even Claudia. And her dad smells like pickles." That got a small smile from Nevaeh. But it didn't last long. They sat her down on the couch, not knowing that what they were doing was cornering her, lovingly, innocently, but cornering her nonetheless. 2 pairs of eyes looked up, 2 identical faces filled with trust and confusion. Nevaeh ran a hand through her curls. "You both know how much I love you, right?" The twins nodded. "You are my greatest gift, my most important job." "But was Daddy not good at his job?" Amelie asked. A lady added, "Did he not want us?" Nevaeh's throat tightened. "How did you explain abandonment without destroying a child's self-worth? How did you explain cruelty without passing along bitterness?" "Your father," she began, choosing her words like stepping through broken glass. "He was not ready." "Ready for what?" a lady asked. For people as precious as you. Amelie frowned. So, he left us because we're too much? No, Nevaeh said quickly. No, baby. He left because he wasn't enough. The twins were quiet. Processing. Elodie leaned in. Does he know we exist? That question hit differently. It wasn't about absence. It was about erasure. Nevaeh hesitated. He knows, she said finally. Then why hasn't he come? Amelie whispered. The moment held, heavy and still. Nevaeh's voice was soft but steady, because sometimes when people are ashamed, they hide. Is he ashamed of us? Elodie asked. No, Nevaeh said, eyes brimming. He's ashamed of himself. The girls didn't respond. They just curled into her, one on each side, and the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of questions neither of them had the vocabulary to ask yet. That evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Nevaeh stood on the balcony alone. Xavier joined her minutes later, offering a glass of red wine. She took it, but didn't drink. They asked about him, she said, staring into the dark sea. He didn't ask who. He didn't need to. They're getting older, he said gently. They'll want more than drawings. I know. You don't have to handle it all alone. Nevaeh turned to him. But I am alone in this. You didn't lie to them. He did. Xavier stepped closer. His presence didn't fix anything, but it steadied her. You know, he said, you're the only mother I've seen who turns every wound into wisdom. She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because in that moment, she wasn't trying to be strong. She was just trying to breathe. That night, Nevaeh couldn't sleep. She lay in bed with the ocean breeze pushing soft salt air through the balcony doors, her fingers curled around, the edge of her blanket as if anchoring herself from spiraling into a past she thought she had long escaped. The drawing was still on the dresser, that empty figure with no face, that word, Daddy, etched with such innocent yearning, it hurt. By morning, she had made up her mind. She didn't speak it aloud, not yet, but something in her spirit had shifted. At breakfast, the twins laughed over blueberry pancakes, giggling about who had more, syrup on their face. The sound should have brought comfort. Instead, it echoed louder against the unspoken weight in the room. Christina noticed. She always did. You're chewing your thoughts again, Christina said as she poured coffee. Nevaeh looked up from her untouched plate. Do you think people deserve a second chance if they never apologized for the first? Christina didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat across from her. That depends. Are we talking about a man or a mistake? Nevaeh's lips twitched. Both. Christina sighed. Jordan, isn't it? Nevaeh didn't nod. She didn't have to. He hasn't reached out. No. He doesn't know who they are today. Doesn't know their voices, their laughter, their allergies. He didn't even send a flower. Nevaeh's voice was quiet. But they want to know. Christina leaned forward. And you want to protect them. I want to prepare them. There's a difference. Christina, let that settle. Just remember, she said, her voice low and sharp, sometimes when you open the door to history, it walks in wearing a nicer suit, but it's still history. Don't let it rewrite itself. Later that afternoon, Nevaeh stood at her home office window, arms folded, watching the garden below. The twins were playing tag with Xavier. Their laughter rose like song. He moved slowly, letting them catch him, fall on him, bury him under a pile of giggles and pink sneakers. The sight made her chest ache, not from envy, but from possibility. When Xavier walked in, brushing grass off his shirt, she turned to him with a calm she didn't fully understand. I'm thinking of letting them meet him, she said. No preamble, no lead-up, just truth. He didn't flinch. He poured water from the crystal decanter and sipped. Then he said, Do you want to see him? Nevaeh didn't hesitate. No, then this isn't for you. She nodded. It's for them. Xavier leaned against the doorframe. Then here's what I think. You're not obligated to make space for someone who left a vacancy. But if you do, do it your way. My way? Without bitterness, without rage, truths without venom. She tilted her head. You think I can do that? He smiled. I think you've done it every day since you held them for the first time. Nevaeh let his words settle over her like sun on skin. He continued, Your compassion will be their power, Nevaeh, not his presence, not his absence. You. She turned toward the garden again, this time with softer eyes. I want to be honest with them. I don't want them to romanticize pain. Then tell the story straight. Not to punish, not to excuse, just to illuminate. They stood there in silence for a long while. Not touching, not needing to. Just two people looking out over a garden where legacy ran in pigtails and shoelaces. That evening, Nevaeh pulled out a blank card from her drawer. It wasn't time yet, but soon. And when it was, she would write the words herself. She would not let the truth arrive by accident, because they deserved better than silence, and better than shame. They deserved clarity, not coated in anger, but wrapped in strength. It was late when she found him in the kitchen. The house was quiet. The twins were asleep. The moonlight cut silver through the windows, washing the countertops in stillness. Xavier stood at the sink, rinsing a bowl, shirtless, his shoulders bathed in calm. She hadn't meant to stare, but she did, not at his body, though she noticed the way his back flexed, the way the lines of him carved certainty into air. She stared because for the first time in years, she realized she was no longer afraid of being seen. He turned and met her gaze. "You okay?" She crossed the room slowly. "I think I am," she whispered. Her voice cracked at the edges, more from surprise than sadness. She stood before him, close enough to hear the rhythm of his breathing. Her fingers trembled as they touched the side of his arm. "I don't hate myself anymore." He reached for her hand, not to possess it, but to hold it gently, as if it were a truth made flesh. "Come here," he said. His voice was soft, never commanding, always inviting. He lifted her onto the counter with reverence, like he was placing her atop the altar she never knew she deserved. Her thighs opened for him instinctively, her breath hitching as he stepped. Between them, but this time, it wasn't fire that led. It was grounding. It was peace. He kissed her slowly, not to take, but to give. His mouth moved against hers like it had all the time in the world, and maybe it did, because neither of them was running anymore. As his hands roamed her waist, her back arched in invitation and the kiss deepened, but even then, it never lost its patience. Her fingers slid into his hair, curling as his mouth descended to her neck. His lips grazed the space below her jaw, and something inside her broke. Tears, not from pain, not from fear, but from recognition. A sob escaped mid-kiss, startling them both. He froze, pulled back. "Did I hurt you?" She shook her head, choking on the intensity of the moment. "No, it's just—" Her hands trembled against his chest. "I didn't know I could feel wanted without shrinking first." Xavier cupped her face with both hands, pressing his forehead to hers. "You were never small," he whispered. "You were just surrounded by men who feared your size." The words shattered whatever was left of the shame she had carried like skin. Her arms pulled him in again. This time she kissed him, with clarity, not confusion. They made love slowly, quietly, rhythmically, as if every breath was a thread sewing back the pieces of her spirit, as if every moan was an act of reclamation. She didn't cry again, but he held her long after they'd finished, fingers tracing lazy circles over her spine, anchoring her in the safety of stillness. Later, wrapped in one of his shirts, she leaned against him on the couch. Their legs tangled, his lips on her temple. "Is this what healing feels like?" she asked softly. "No," he said. "This is what home feels like." And for once, she didn't argue. She just curled deeper into his chest and let herself believe it. The name on the building wasn't his. It never would be again. The office was sterile, row after row of engineers hunched behind dual monitors, lost in a rhythm of silence and keystrokes. Jordan sat in the back, not because it was assigned, but because obscurity was safer than memory. He went by Luis now, a name without ties, a life with no roots. Most days, no one even remembered he had once owned a house that looked like a museum, or that his voice once echoed in boardrooms filled with power brokers. His face was slimmer now, his hair longer, his smile extinct. At exactly 7 p.m. every night, he returned to his one-bedroom flat with 0 windows and a dying fern by the door. And after throwing his keys into the chipped ceramic bowl, he turned on the television, not for entertainment, but for penance, because there she was, always, Nevaeh, glowing on the screen in a silk cream blouse, flanked by her board of directors, the founder of Eladi and Amelie, her now global design tech company that wove artificial intelligence into sustainable textiles. Her name trended more than his ever had. Her twin daughters, always smiling in matching braids, had become ambassadors for ethical fashion before they hit 12. And the irony, she never used his name. Not once. Not in interviews. Not in product launches. Not even in the unauthorized documentary that aired last spring titled Built from Ashes, The Rise of Nevaeh Cardenas. To the world, Jordan did not exist. But he did. In the quiet. In the unspoken. In the ache that bloomed just beneath his rib cage every time he watched her speak with fire and compassion. He studied her like scripture, memorized the tilt of her smile when she talked about empowering women who had once been mocked for growing up with nothing. He knew that was for him, a bullet wrapped in a blessing. His coworkers had no clue who she was to him, or who he had once been to the world. Luis was just the guy who brought strong coffee, declined happy hour, and typed faster than anyone in the room. They didn't know that he had held that woman once, not in dreams. In fact, he tried to write a letter once, typed it, deleted it, rewrote it, then burned it, on a night when the silence became too loud. He wanted to say he was sorry. He wanted to say he had changed. But then he remembered her final words, hurled like acid on the day she left. You only touched me to diminish me. You never saw me beyond your own ego. No letter could undo that. No apology could unshatter what he had broken. And so he watched, from a distance, from nowhere, as her empire grew taller than his once had, as her daughters laughed on red carpets. Jordan, no, Luis, knew what this was now. It wasn't heartbreak. It was exile. Not the kind you flee from, but the kind you earn. And maybe that was justice. It was a quiet morning, not because the world had gone still, but because she had chosen it that way. No flashing cameras, no press breakfast, no scheduled interviews. Nevaeh had told her assistant to cancel everything. Today wasn't about headlines. It was about home. The villa smelled of cinnamon and vanilla from the pancakes a lady insisted on making, burnt edges and all. Amelie had scattered rose petals over the table. Not the expensive kind, just the ones she'd clipped from the garden at sunrise, barefoot, whispering, "Don't tell Mom." They wore matching pajamas, sky blue, printed with little crowns. They ran to her room just after 8 a.m., jumping on the bed like it was a trampoline of joy. "Happy birthday, Queen Mama." Nevaeh's laughter cracked through her throat before she could even wipe the sleep from her eyes. She sat up between them, hair tangled, heart full. "We have a gift," Amelie said, pulling a wrapped bundle from behind her back. "It's not bought," Aletti added quickly. "We made it." The twins handed her a square package wrapped in recycled brown paper and tied with lavender yarn. Nevaeh peeled it open gently, her hands already trembling. Inside was a handmade photo frame, wooden, slightly crooked at the corners, decorated, with pressed flowers, glitter hearts, and tiny painted words in uneven cursive. "To the Queen of our world." She covered her mouth with her hand. The photo they had chosen for the frame, one she hadn't even remembered taking, was of her asleep. On the sofa, both girls curled up beside her, one hand resting on each of their backs. No makeup, no jewelry, just her, raw, maternal, still. "I don't look like a queen," she whispered. "You look exactly like one," Aletti said, snuggling into her side. "Real queens don't wear thrones. They carry people," Amelie added, lifting her chin proudly. Nevaeh didn't speak for a long while. She just pulled them both into her lap, kissed their cheeks, and held the frame like it was the most precious artifact ever made. Because it was. Later that afternoon, when the girls had gone to the backyard to build sandcastles, near the pool, Xavier walked in with quiet steps and a velvet box in his hand. He didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the doorway and watched her, barefoot and glowing, still holding the frame. "You look like a poem," he murmured. She turned slowly, a soft smile teasing her lips. "No one's ever called me that before." He stepped forward and knelt, not in theatrics, not in spectacle, just one knee, one breath, one box. Inside it was a ring, not enormous, not glitzy, simple platinum with an infinity groove carved inside, barely visible unless you knew to look. She didn't cry this time. She just whispered yes as he slid it onto her finger. "Was that the proposal?" she asked, amused. "No," he said. "That was the answer to a question I've been living." They didn't call the girls in. They didn't post it online. They just curled into each other on the sun-drenched couch, Nevaeh's head resting against Xavier's chest, her new ring catching the afternoon light like a whisper. And in that stillness, Nevaeh understood something that money, applause, or revenge could never give her. She was loved, not because of her battles, but because she'd survived them and chosen softness anyway. The wind rolled in soft from the hills of Granada, curling through the lemon trees and brushing the terrace with late evening gold. Nevaeh stood where she always had in her dreams, high above a city that once mocked her, wrapped in nothing but peace. Her curls danced with the breeze, wild and free. She wasn't in heels. She wasn't in armor. She wasn't holding a speech or a title. She was holding the hands of her daughters. Amelie stood on her left, a lady on her right, their shoulders pressed to hers, their faces turned toward the horizon. Behind them, not stepping ahead, not leading, just there, stood Xavier, hands tucked in his pockets, eyes on the sky, presence like an anchor. Not a man in front of her, a man with her. No words were spoken in that moment. None were needed. They had survived judgment, betrayal, condescension, and silence. And here they were, not crowned by the world, but by each other. Down below, across rooftops and alleys, her old life slumbered somewhere in the distance, irrelevant, weightless. She had no need to shout her triumph. The life she lived now was the loudest answer. Nevaeh closed her eyes for a breath, felt the press of her daughter's palms, felt the hum of Xavier's stillness behind her. And when she opened them again, her eyes were steady, lit not with rage, not even pride, but clarity. This was the last door closed, and the first one never needing to open again. She turned to the camera, just one, held by her assistant who'd asked to document her journey in private moments. She spoke to no microphone, only to those who needed it.